So I'm back to square one. Here, walking out here. Like I said, the purpose of the videos is just to educate. Like I drank, just some tea. But the purpose of the videos was really to educate and educate the population, and um like I don't know what the solution for a lot of these problems are, and I know people are gonna like say one thing or the other, and it's hard to say even what to say anymore, because it seems like every day you learn something new, that this thing is canceled and it's horrible. It seems like humanity canceled itself off. And I mean, yeah, there's sexual abuse allegations of churches and schools, and it's a psychological it destroys people, because you know like, what kind of world is this, that these things happen? And every time a news reporter or a journalist, or even myself, I talk about these things, it's not like they get better. It's not like they, like, obviously to some extent, there needs to be some press in order to bring awareness to any issue, but like, some of the reporting is insensitive, some of it's just for attention, and the reporter is not even aware of that. So, and again, because it seems as though like the things of the world and the way the world is evil, and it's so evil that before you were born, a lot of these problems were already set in place. You just going to jail, or getting into a fight only because you're annoying. um and they talk about MAID, like the medical assistance in dying procedure, and I was all for it and I wanted it, but I don't know why I didn't go through with it. um I know Dr. Kevorkian, he was a pro euthanasia guy, but they put him in prison because apparently he wasn't legit or something of the sort. You know, like like me communicating in this voice and me trying to like reason with real life, and it's almost like it's no longer reasonable. You don't know the rational approach. You don't know how to approach the situation. You don't know what even the antidote is. You don't know how to solve this issue. And it's like I said, like the cards were already set. Everything was already predicted, and there was very little conscious choice you could have made to alter your fate. But you know uh again, I and it's like people are on the backs of other people. I got my achievements and they got theirs, and to some extent we help each other out. For the most part, it's you snooze, you lose. And it's hard because you get your foot stuck in a subway like I did once, or you know you you know you you don't have a railing to hold on to, or you fall, you get yourself into a jam. You could be screwed, and that's it. And a lot of the things happening now are just the logistical truths of the world playing out in real time. It's not like I just say these things. And I don't know how I prepare for the end of my time here, because I think 24 is everyone's. I don't even know what to say. Like, they'll say young, say old, and then again, maybe old people are just cowards because they didn't, fight in their time. And obviously, the whole argument goes about where, well, you want them to go, like, so if the guy doesn't, nearly escape death, then they're not a worthy human. They're not a reputable. Um, they're not, you know, of a caliber. I mean, it's just what it is. You only have the examples of people, born living right now, um, of any race, a person, I guess you're judging them on their merit, their good deeds, maybe like kind of the way like a god would. But obviously, like, it's kind of too late for that now. Um, if I could build a time machine, that's what I would be doing. That's what I'd be doing. But I guess I don't have the resources here and now. But because then people will read about you and your pickle you got yourself into, and they learn from it. Making sure they don't make that same mistake. One little thing, I'm walking out here, your foot gets stuck in a little hole or something. Your shoe gets stuck. Your shoelace is untied and you fall over, or there's a bacteria on the ground, some virus, parasite, like my grandmother would say. And so at this point, it's all about preparing for this moment that I've described. Since 2012, we all know this moment, because it's not about the first argument. It's not about impulse control. It's about the original causation of Israel and Palestine, going back to millennium. It's not about 1947. It's not about 1947. It's not about it's about the Crimean War, right? The original issue. It's about and obviously, again, like, I'm responsible for my actions. Other people are responsible for theirs, and whatever they did right, whatever they did wrong. I mean, reality itself is cruel. Like, -35 winters, like that came out of nowhere. Like, really, it came out of nowhere. And maybe humanity only learns this hard way through experience. But maybe at this point, you're not even doing a good thing by helping the person, because the fact that they could backstab you back, or just you're going to be overwhelmed with your own problems. That by the time you get to that issue, it's already it's too late for you. So you just and this is why I say, like, I don't know what kind of reality I'm talking about. Is it one where there's geometric shapes? Is it one where there's I don't know, there's an all-loving God? Is it one where you're so out of the world that you're like behind, or you're in some kind of you go so back far in time that you're at the Big Bang? I don't know what to say, really, because again, like, I'm just one person, right? I could have easily been one of the abortions in the clinic. I could have easily been the miscarriage. I could have easily I don't know. Like, I'm not saying anybody deserves any of that, but like, it could easily been one or the other. But the whole issue at hand, it's like a Chris Hansen interrogation. I mean, I throw myself out there because every moment, maybe there was a proper way, or there was like the best version of these events that play out, and then there's like the worst version. And like, the naive person, the ignorantly bliss, the ones who manage to the ones who they didn't end up like, I don't know. The internet was created definitely by like a schizophrenic who did sit in their basement a long time, or in their house, to eventually develop such a thing, with its pros and its cons. And everything that's happened afterwards, the level of death caused. But obviously, maybe some lives are saved, right? Some people maybe watch videos like this, or hell, it might not be even a video like this. It could be from anyone, right? And they learn something that they would have never known that, saved their life, which I guess was a good thing. But like, all in all, the tragedy must play out, because I don't know, I don't really know what to say. We can go to 2012 where, DoorDash and Uber Eats, all these things became the norm, right? And it's like, we can go to the ghost face with the hijab and, the Klan, right? Just with like the bathtub and bathrobe, or the bed sheet. And again, the horror that sits back, that this whole time people wanted a life like mine, and they didn't want the vacations. No, all they wanted was just to go to school, go home, and and the rest of the mess I cause is my fault. And it ruins people, because it ruins people's initial lives, the initial concept of moving to a country, raising a family, and it's almost like I have to say this, but I'm a test example, and my parents are definitely a test example of not what to do. I mean, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but there's so many mistakes that they've made that it's unfixable, and they wanted more than what they were given. They wanted way more, and they got something half, right? Like, I'm missing a tooth, for example. Obviously, it's not the worst thing in the world. You could be missing, you could be born autistic, you could be born with dementia. You don't know. There's Lou Gehrig's, poliosis, Alzheimer's. I don't even know what to say, and at the point that we're at, no family doctors, no, you will have to manually figure these things out. And maybe some of these people do figure these things out. They patch themselves out, they stitch themselves together, and they get back into the game, just like they say. But it's definitely a torn reality. And me, the cowardly thing to do, the way I live, the cowardly thing to do is to, just sit on the internet and, play these psychologically destroying games like Spore or Sims, and, the rest is just the Matrix history. Everything followed through on then, because there had to be someone to blame. There had to be one person to throw all the blame on, and it had to be me, right? The only reason the people here can't live a normal life would be because of me. Now, that being said, obviously, there's diseases, and I know my issues, and I know what I caused, so I don't, I know that I'm not the candidate who will ever, I'm not the candidate who does. But I'm not going to be living a great standard of living. I'm going to be living in a tent after I graduate. If I graduate, and then some. It's psychologically daunting. I mean, again, 2012 was where these things became all the more evident. And these videos, they don't have a good pre-context. I can run away from, other people, but I can't run away